Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Wendigo horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. Something absolutely malevolent exists in rural Montana. The jump scares, the monster under the bed, your friend dressed up as a man with a knife. These are all pretty damn scary. But I consider these temporary and/or mild scares that aren't slow. Oftentimes, it's a harmless scene from a movie or a friend pulling a prank on you that elicits a 5-second shriek. True fear, a pervasive fear that slowly eats away at your conscience, comes out of the unknown. The feeling that deep in the depths of darkness, something is going to take you away, that something is lurking in the shadows. It's the feeling that any second, you could be dead. The feeling that a pair of beady eyes are staring right at you, but you can't stare back. My journey began in Montana. It was a November night in 2004, and I was en route to Calgary, Canada. My family comes from Canada, and I was making the drive from my home in Billings to Calgary. The main highways were shutting down in preparation for a snowstorm, and few dared to drive out in the impending snowstorm. Me, I was a cocky 20-year-old who didn't give a damn. I figured, I was born in Canada. I drive a F-150. I can handle some snowy roads. Rural Montana is eerie at night, especially the back roads. The main route from Kalispell to Lethbridge, Canada, was closed, and I was forced to take a back route, a seemingly endless 2-lane road that probably hadn't been worked on in decades. I remember turning my turn signal on and heading north on that road. It was about 11 p.m., and the snow showers were beginning to turn into a windy, snowy mess, with my windshield wipers just barely clearing off the falling snow. I wasn't worried about the weather, nor the ice coating the 2-laned road, nor the health of my mother. No, I was preoccupied with the feeling that something was behind me. See, the road was entirely straight and cut through a dense pine forest. The road was devoid of any curves, turns, or signs. It was merely a 50-mile-long straight shot through a dense forest. Straight, endless. My brights only exposed the sheer desolation, the isolation of the environment in which I was in. I hadn't seen an automobile in half an hour. I felt exposed yet utterly alone at the same time. To calm my nerves, I inserted a Toby Keith CD into my radio and cranked the volume up. The soothing sound of country guitar was beginning to relax me. It was alleviating the feeling of unease. About a minute into the song, the track became jumbled. The guitar solo was abruptly interrupted by scratchy sounds. It was akin to nail on a chalkboard. It was absolutely unbearable. As I adjusted the volume, my F-150 lost traction on the ice, and within seconds, I found my car coming to a screeching halt. I had trapped in a large snow bank approximately 20 feet off the side of the road. F-U-C-K, I screamed. I turned on my hazards and proceeded to curse like a sailor as I stepped out of the car and into the snowy landscape. The blizzard hindered the visibility to the point where I could hardly see feet in front of me. A ferocious icy wind was burning my face, and the feeling of unease only grew. I threw on an extra parka and turned my car off. That's when I heard his voice. "Adam," he said. "Adam." It was a voice that absolutely sent shivers up my spine, a voice that caused me to tense up like a marble statue. It was the voice of my father. "Adam, is that you?" I gulped and could barely breathe. My father was a park ranger in Banff, and then at Glacier National Park when we moved to America. When I was 10 years old, he got lost in a snowstorm and was never heard from again. His body was never found, and while the police searched for weeks, he was eventually declared dead. I didn't have time to draw parallels between my situation and his situation, and I let emotion overtake me. "Dad," I continued. "Dad, Dad, I can't see you." "I can see you just fine," it said. "Come a little closer." I froze. The seconds of emotions and adrenaline had abruptly come to a halt. I'm a rational man. My father was dead. He had been dead for 10 years. Something else was going on. "Adam," did I stutter? "Come with me," it said. "Come with me. It's nice and warm where I stand. Come with me." I still couldn't see whatever the fuck was speaking, and I had no time to play games. I hopped in my car and started the ignition. The damn thing wouldn't start. "Adam, your car won't start. It's futile," it said. The voice was distorted this time. It sounded as if my father had the flu, a real deep, raspy voice. Despite the freezing cold, I could feel nervous sweat dripping from my brow. The slow scare I mentioned was sinking in. I couldn't think. My hand shook relentlessly as I tried to start the car. Against my better judgment, I stepped out the pickup truck and ran the opposite direction. I had never run faster in my life. The only force keeping my ass from running out of breath was pure fear and adrenaline. Behind me, I heard it calling my name, its voice becoming more distorted each second. "Adam, Adam, Adam." Within minutes, as the snow relentlessly beat down on me, and as the moon became shrouded by pine trees and snow, I found myself in the middle of a pine forest. Lost completely. Its voice, however, was slowly disappearing. As it faded into the night, so did my consciousness. The cold had gotten to me, and I hadn't realized it. Before I drifted to an unconscious sleep, I slowly put two and two together. It's November. My dad. November. Snowstorm. Lost forever. Those were my final thoughts before waking up in a Great Falls hospital. Surrounded by doctors, I glanced around me. I was dizzy and dozed in and out of consciousness before finally waking up. I drew a comparison between what happened to my father when I was 10 and the near death I had avoided. I shivered. After minutes of recuperating, the doctor beside my bed explained what had happened. "Mr. Redacted, you are a lucky man. You were found unconscious 200 yards away from a country road. Your body temperature was 88 F. I'm amazed that you seemingly won't suffer any long-term effects." "Who found me?" I asked, completely dazed, still recalling the thing that had chased me. "Some man driving to Missoula saw your Ford deep in the trees off the side of the road, your hazards reflecting some light. Minutes later, he heard groaning and found your motionless body in the snow." The doctor continued, "I only have one real question before I let you rest and talk to your mother. What drove you to leave your automobile and run into a pine forest in the middle of a snowstorm?" He coughed and chuckled as he said, "I mean, come on, what happened? Did you see a ghost?" As he laughed at his corny joke, I thought to myself, I wish I had seen it. Second story. I heard the last words of the woman in the woods. My hometown of Cedar Creek, Colorado had a woman who everyone loved to hate. Her name was Ms. Gatlin, and she was both my elementary school's janitor and the scapegoat for all unfortunate events around our town. The Cedar Creek elderly despised her for having a son out of wedlock, and the town parents scorned her for giving said son too much freedom, a parenting style which had supposedly led to his death at the hands of our town's eponymous river. As for the children of Cedar Creek, we didn't care at all about social conventions or parental negligence, but we all agreed that Ms. Gatlin was an ugly lady, and that was enough to warrant our cruelty. My best friend at the time was a curly-haired menace to society named Isaac who, by 5th grade, had established himself as a ringleader amongst the neighborhood boys. He did his best to inconvenience Miss Gatlin, though his pranks did little to rattle her. If we spread rumors about her poor hygiene just within her earshot, Miss Gatlin didn't bat an eye. If we released bugs inside her janitorial closet, she'd calmly sweep them outside. If we stuffed rotten food inside her locker, she'd clean it out quietly and without complaint. Our usual tricks never worked on Ms. Gatlin, and all of us unimaginative kids were stumped by how to best a woman whose job was to clean up messes of all kinds. In my last year of primary school, Hanukkah fell a week and a half before we were dismissed for winter break. All of the Jewish children thoroughly enjoyed showing off their gifts to the rest of us, who had to wait an eternity for our presents. Thanks to Kim Possible, Spy Kids, and Totally Spies, every kid in Cedar Creek was obsessed with espionage, so Isaac's gift of a spy deck kit for kids made him even more popular than usual. Most of the kit was cheap plastic junk, but there was a small spy radio that seemed very well manufactured. It consisted of an earpiece and a button-sized microphone that was supposedly capable of transmitting audio up to a radius of 5 miles. Isaac, myself, and the rest of our crew spent most of the week before winter break running around town and testing the capabilities of the device. The audio quality was surprisingly good, although the earpiece and microphone could only be separated for about 3 miles before the sounds became too distorted to understand. It was a novel concept for a few days, but after a while we grew bored of playing walkie-talkie. Isaac wanted to use it for its intended purpose, surveillance, and he had the perfect target in mind. On the last day before winter break, Isaac and I glued the button-sized device to the back of an old brooch we had found in his sister's jewelry box. We covered it up with a strip of velvet and then glued on the pin and catch, and by the time we were done, you couldn't tell anything was amiss. We put it in a small white box, which we put in my backpack for later. We determined that I should be the one to deliver it, given Isaac's reputation as a prankster. After school, I found Ms. Gatlin in the staff break room. She barely looked at me as I walked into the room. I noticed, along the far wall of the break room, a wall of cubbies, each one marked with the name of a staff member. All of them were filled with gifts and letters, presumably from parents or other employees at the school. All of them, that is, except one. "You can't be in here, kid," Ms. Gatlin said to me in her gruff voice. I know. I swung my backpack onto my stomach and fished around for the box. It had gotten a little banged up in my bag, but I figured she wouldn't really care. I procured it and held it out to her. "But I wanted to give you this before the break." She stopped packing up, turning fully toward me. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring suspiciously at the box. Setting her bag down, she took a few steps forward and grabbed the box out of my hand. She gave it a slight rattle and then opened it slowly. When she saw the brooch, she gingerly took it out of the box and turned it around in her hand. Then she paused again, looking between the glittering, fake emerald and me. "It's not new. Sorry, it used to be my mom's," I told her, going off of the script Isaac and I had conceived to add more authenticity to the handoff. "She doesn't wear it anymore, but I thought you might like it." Ms. Gatlin kept staring at me, her expression unreadable. I half expected her to chuck it into the garbage bin in the corner of the room, but to my relief, she gave me a single nod. "Thank you," she said, and pinned the brooch onto her cardigan carefully, like it was a precious gem and not some cheap hunk of plastic. I gave her a smile that she did not return, and then she shooed me away. Isaac was waiting for me in the woods outside school. I flashed him a thumbs up, and he slapped my back twice in congratulations. He pulled the earpiece out of his backpack and held it between us. I put my ear next to the speaker and was delighted when I could hear movement. The sound was slightly more muffled now by the velvet backing, but the audio quality was still really good. We heard the sound of snow crunching under Ms. Gatlin's feet as she walked herself through the woods home. We listened giddily for a few minutes, then raced back to my house to celebrate our success with hot chocolate. Since we had the attention span of two 10-year-old boys, we forgot about our triumph until just a few minutes before Isaac's mom came to pick him up. When I remembered, I pulled out the earpiece, which we had decided would live at my house since it was closer to Ms. Gatlin's, and listened. More than last year, but not as much as the year before last. What do you think about it? Do you like it? Can you feel it? I see. Me personally, I've loved it since I was a little girl. It falls so prettily. What the heck is she saying? Isaac asked me, as if I had any clue. The better question, in my mind at least, was who the heck was she talking to? She had no kids or husband and didn't have any friends as far as I knew. I don't know, I said. She's talking about snow, I think. Though the question, can you feel it, seemed an odd thing to ask anyone. We sat there listening to her talk for 5 minutes straight. I'd never heard Miss Gatlin talk that much in my life, even though I'd seen her most days since I was only 5 years old. Looking back, I'm not entirely sure what we had expected, but it certainly wasn't a monologue of that length. We strained our ears listening for another voice, but heard nothing. Maybe she's schizophrenic? Isaac volunteered. I had no idea what that was, but I trusted his authority. His mom showed up to take him home, and I turned the speaker off to walk him outside. After that, every once in a while, I would turn the speaker on and listen. It seemed that no matter the time, be it early in the morning or late at night, Miss Gatlin was always talking. She talked about all kinds of things, everything from clothing to stocks to the weather to politics. Sometimes she prayed, talking so quickly and quietly that I could only make out one out of every 5 or so words. She apologized often and spoke constantly of a promise. Sometimes, when I turned on the speaker, all I heard were sobs, and sometimes the conversations were so strange that I couldn't make heads or tails of them. A young woman smiled at me today at the grocery market. Isn't that just the sweetest thing? I felt like it's been so long since someone smiled at me like that. Yes, I know she was just doing her job. Probably doesn't even know my name, haha. Oh, how hard this has been, how lonesome. But I am so very close to the finish line. I won't break my promise now. A few days before we returned to school, Isaac and I made the trek over to her house in an attempt to figure out who she was speaking to. I had seen her house a few times before, and each time I was taken aback by how small it was. Isolated and weathered, her home stood at the edge of the southern woodlands on a large plot of land, off of a street with very little through traffic. I remember standing on the side of the road with Isaac, staring at the shack-like house, which must have only had room for a bedroom, a bathroom, and maybe a tiny kitchen. There's no way anyone else lives there, Isaac said after a while of standing and staring. We were too far away to peer in through the windows, but we were also too afraid to venture any closer. She's either a witch, or she's just some sad, ugly old lady who went crazy from having no friends. Isaac got bored quickly, so we left not too long after that. After we had made our way partway down the street, something compelled me to turn around and give the house a final look. When I did, I saw the unmistakable shape of Ms. Gatlin standing on the porch, staring in our direction. I turned away and grabbed a hold of Isaac's arm. "She's watching us," I whispered to him. His eyes grew wide. "Shit," he said. "Should we run?" "No, that'll look suspicious. Let's just keep walking." We walked until we were out of eyeshot, and then we ran all the way home. I'm not quite sure what spooked us so badly, but for some reason, even when I was back in the safety of my own home, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes burrowing into my back. And soon they'll all be coming back. It's hard seeing them sometimes, knowing my Oliver was among them once. Sometimes I think I see him. At least it'll get easier soon. Thanks to you. By the time we went back to school, my friends had grown bored of the spy gear. I volunteered to return Isaac's speaker, but he said it was practically useless now since we couldn't retrieve the microphone. Surprisingly, Miss Gatlin continued to wear the brooch every day. It was always pinned to her non-work clothes, so the only time she was unbugged, as Isaac put it, was when she was in her janitorial outfit at my school. Seeing her guard the brooch so carefully made me feel kinda bad. Was that the only gift she had gotten for Christmas? Was it the only gift she had gotten in the past decade? Maybe she wasn't a witch or crazy. Maybe she was just lonely and had learned to cope by talking to herself. Months passed. Isaac and company, finally coming to terms with the fact that they would never get the rise they were looking for out of Miss Gatlin, moved on to terrorizing a curmudgeonly old man who lived across from Cedar Creek Elementary and was always yelling at kids for one reason or another. I was happy for Miss Gatlin. One day in March, I found her sitting on a bench at the edge of campus during lunch. I took a seat next to her, not expecting much. She took one look at me, then fixed her gaze back at the sad-looking sandwich in her hand. "What do you want?" she asked without looking at me. "Nothing. Just wanted to sit here." She picked at the sandwich. "We're not friends, kid." "I know. You don't have any friends." "That's right," she nodded. "Maybe one day, though," I said, and to my surprise, she laughed. I didn't even realize she was capable of laughing. She looked at me properly for the first time in our brief conversation, and I noticed that she was smiling. It was an unpracticed smile, but a genuine one. "Yeah," she said. "Maybe one day." Miss Gatlin packed up and headed back to the school building after that. She left a bag of mini Oreos on the bench next to me. I think she did it on purpose. I grew accustomed to checking up on her every now and then, listening to her conversations with herself. Sometimes, it almost felt like she was talking to me. Looking back on it now, I realize what a little villain I was, and what an immense invasion of privacy I was committing. I wish that I could take it back now, especially considering what happened next. Friday, May 17th marked the 10-year anniversary of Oliver Gatlin's death. I kept an eye on Ms. Gatlin throughout the day, but she didn't seem any more dejected than usual. Maybe things were finally looking up for her. In any case, although I hadn't checked in on her for a while, I decided that evening to see how she was doing. My parents were gone for the weekend, and I was only allowed to stay at home alone if I stayed inside the whole time, so I had nothing better to do. Not long after sunset, as I lounged on the floor of my bedroom, I turned on the earpiece. Miss Gatlin was talking to herself, as always, but there was something strange about her tone. She sounded more excited than ever. "Almost there, almost there, almost there." She repeated those two words over and over until, at exactly 11:44 p.m., she let out a sound that I only understood years later to be a cry of triumph. "It is done. It is done, Dark Angel. Thank you. Thank you. 10 years of solitude, and it was worth every second. Now, Angel, bring him back. Bring him back to me." What was she on about now? Were those song lyrics or something? I strained my ears, listening for another person out of habit, but of course, there was only Ms. Gatlin's voice. After a moment, her cries of happiness faded, her voice taking on a confused tone. "What do you mean?" "No, that can't be true." I kept my promise. I followed every rule. I let no one in, kept no companions, made no friends. I kept my wish a secret, as you told me. My angel, I sat up slowly, the building terror in her voice putting me on edge even from miles away. And then she asked a question that still haunts me to this day. "What do you mean I had an audience?" There was a moment of silence, and then the surefire sound of the velvet backing of the brooch being ripped away. I could hear her breath, sharper and clearer than ever before, as she repeated a single word. "No, no, 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 no." She withdrew from the microphone, her rapid breaths replaced by what sounded like her front door being thrown open with a bang. There was no more noise from the microphone. I remember standing up in my bedroom, not quite understanding what had just happened, and not quite knowing what to do next. Something told me that I should go downstairs and make sure that the doors were locked. So I told myself to man up and forced myself down the stairs to the dark first floor. I made my way around the whole house, checking the doors and windows. Once I was done, I just stood there. Somehow, I knew she was coming, and that there was nothing I could do to stop it. I thought I was hearing the wind, but as it grew louder, I realized I was hearing wailing. I heard it long before I saw her, that gut-wrenching cry, that sound that I had previously heard only pale imitations of in movies where a mother loses her child. Standing in the darkness of my living room, I watched her sprint from the tree line towards my house. Her mouth was wide open, her eyes glazed over, and her body dressed in a white nightgown. She looked and sounded like something out of my worst night terrors. I dropped to the floor and crawled away from the window, taking cover behind a couch. "Why?" she howled, her mournful voice rising and falling as she ascended the steps to my front porch and slammed her fist against the door. "Why?" I needed to get to the phone, but the house phone was right next to the widow, and I was petrified. She hit the door so hard I was afraid that the hinges would give way. "How could you do this to me?" I clamped a hand over my mouth. She couldn't possibly know for certain that I was in the house, could she? The origin of the wailing shifted as she rounded the wraparound porch, the heavy knocks of her fists against the door giving way to the thudding of her shoes on the wooden porch floor. I stuck my head around the couch and saw no one at the front window, but when I looked to the side window, I saw a face hovering inches from the glass. I screamed at the top of my lungs as her fist came into contact with the glass, shattering it. I was so horrified by the rain of blood-speckled glass that I almost missed the sight of a shotgun scabbard strapped to her torso. Certain I was about to die, I screamed at her to go away, to leave me alone, and she screamed right back at me, asking me questions that I didn't understand. Dogs had begun to bark at the commotion, and my next-door neighbor's porch light turned on. "Please just go away," I shrieked as I finally found my footing and raced to the phone. I grabbed it from its holder, starting to type 911 as I decided whether or not I should risk running to the neighbor's house. When I looked at the broken window, though, she was nowhere to be seen. The wailing had receded, growing fainter and fainter until I couldn't hear her at all. I stood there dumbly until the sound faded entirely, my hand shaking. She was gone. I was sure of it. Should I still call emergency services? After a moment, I heard another, fainter sound and recognized the statusy audio immediately as a transmission from Isaac's spy gear. I raced upstairs, still clutching the phone, and grabbed the speaker from the floor where I had dropped it. I pressed it against my ear, listening to the faint sound of a familiar voice. "I hope this was worth it, kid," it said, calmly and coldly. "I hope you and your friends can laugh about this." I heard a bang, and then I heard nothing at all. It took 2 weeks for the police to find her body. Her final resting place was deep in the woods, under a thick shroud of junipers not far from the banks of Cedar Creek. As her face was mutilated beyond recognition, her body was identified by the shotgun lying beside her. They say that, although she was covered in enough blood to entice every animal within a 3-mile radius, her corpse was untouched by the beasts. Even the insects seemed hesitant to feed and the fungi slow to grow upon her body, as though even the lowliest creatures feared contamination by the lonely woman in the woods. They did not find a brooch on her person. Third story. Unidentifiable 10-foot-tall creature spotted in Lebanon, Maine. My sister and I were driving to a haunted walk in Lebanon, Maine called Destination Haunt, and while in the town trying to find the place, we drove onto this really old dirt road called Lord Road from the east. At the time we turned onto the road, it was day and the sun was out. As soon as we started driving down, the sky turned near black like night, as if the sun was setting, and a fog engulfed the road. We quickly started joking about how this is like one of those wrong turn roads in those horror movies where a group of kids get lost in the woods and never leave. It added to the effect when we drove over an old wooden bridge suspended over a river. My sister acknowledged the narrowness of the road and asked how two cars could fit traveling in opposite directions. I joked, "Well, no one ever leaves this place. In Maine, all you see are fields of trees for hundreds of miles at a time, but the trees on this road looked unusually different. They were all collectively old and had the color sucked out of them. Their branches and bases curved in usually zigzag patterns, unlike conventional trees that grow in a pattern to get the most sunlight. I drove a few miles until I had enough of the massive puddles and decided to call the place we were trying to find. They told me that their location was miles away on the west side of this road and to turn back because the east side was flooded, and we should enter the west end entrance located on the other side of town instead. We turned around and saw a moose walking across the road, very normal in Maine, but right behind it was a 10-foot-tall black as can be two-legged and unnaturally slim creature running unnaturally fast across the road. My sister screamed. It looked like Slender Man. Only it had huge black jagged horns and had no apparent bodily features or shape to it. It looked like a 2D cutout of an unnatural human. When we drove by where he ran, we looked into the woods and saw it standing on two legs next to the moose. It leaned over in a hunchback manner and started walking around on all limbs, and there were others just like it emerging from the mist. We drove the hell out of there, hoping my engine wouldn't seize from the huge-ass puddles. But on our way back, we saw two abandoned buildings with old cars from the 50s and 60s that rotted into the earth. Those houses were not there before when we originally drove down. The creepiest part was when we got back to the main road because the sun was almost set and the sky almost pitch black. When we pulled out of the road, the sun reappeared. The sky readjusted to day as if nothing ever happened. Later that night, I looked at Google Maps and the road was completely different on there, filled with things that wasn't there when we driving, and all the houses looked new. After telling a few people about it, someone told me that Lebanon, Maine is known to have a lot of strange paranormal stuff happen, and that there is even a self-proclaimed witch fortune teller who lives there. Fourth story. I rented a cottage on Airbnb. My wife and I lost more than just the memories we made. I have whatever the opposite of a recommendation is, to make for a cottage my wife and I booked on Airbnb. Maybe someone can help fill in the details I'm having trouble remembering. I hope so. My wife and I live in Virginia along with our dog, Algernon. We both work and have a decent amount of friends, or friendly acquaintances at least, so our lives are relatively busy. Now don't get me wrong, we're both homebodies as much as we can manage, but the social pull of the occasional brunch and the need to buy groceries, fold laundry, walk the dog, etc., tend to fill up a calendar. It's because of all this that whenever we can get away for a weekend, we try to. Last fall, my wife Olivia was finishing a months-long project at work, and as it happened, I had a week or so of twiddling my thumbs on the horizon at my job. We decided to seize the opportunity and take a 3-day weekend in the Blue Ridge Mountains. My coworker, Martin, invited himself along, but being friends outside of work, we were happy to have him. Now here's where I have to start relying on some kind of fuzzy memories. We found a place to rent on Airbnb for a steal. I recall the host saying that there was a cancellation, but when I later went back to check the website, I found nothing. My bank account and my emails, nothing. No mention of the cottage at all. I call it a cottage, but if you're thinking of a log cabin in the woods, you're picturing it wrong. Think more Rivendell from the Lord of the Rings movies, but with a chef's kitchen. You get the idea. I had asked my wife what she thought, and she matter-of-factly said, "Honey, I would fuck that house." So it was settled. A week later we left. I couldn't tell you where we drove exactly after we got off the Skyline Drive. My Maps app doesn't seem to remember either. But the mountains were beautiful as we slowly curved around the meandering scenic roads. Yellows, tawny reds, campfire oranges, and blues as they stretched onward into the distance. We took our time, stopped at overlooks, bought some fresh vegetables at a roadside stand. At the vegetable stand, the seller, a friendly woman in a thick sweater and jeans, asked us where we were staying. I told her. Now, I can't remember what I said, but I can remember the look in her eyes, a look of fear, warning, I now know. She had gripped my wrist so tightly, but then said, "Enjoy your stay. It's a really beautiful cottage." What was that? My wife asked as we drove away. I don't know. Mountain flirting? I joked uneasily, watching the seller's terrified face as it shrank away in my rearview mirror. Martin's blue Jetta was parked next to the cottage as we pulled up. We took the place in through the sap-freckled windshield of our SUV. Large, vaguely Nordic, in pale creams and whites with an A-frame roof and a wraparound screened-in porch. I can still picture it perfectly in my mind. I've even tried to draw it a few times. I'm no great artist, but I can draw well enough. Even so, the pictures always end up looking like heavy-handed scribbles. We took our groceries and bags out of the car and looked forward to sun-dappled hikes and cool, lazy evenings drinking wine and listening to the music of the crickets. Martin greeted us at the door after we passed through the rocking chair-laden porch. I say greeted, but really he stood in the doorway as Olivia opened it. He looked, I don't know, tired, I suppose. "Hi, Marty," my wife said, throwing her arms around him in an ungraceful, very Olivia hug. Martin stared at me over my wife's shoulder, his eyes widening in a look somehow reminiscent of the vegetable seller's. His bottom lip was trembling slightly, and as I knitted my brow in confusion, he whispered, "Don't." Olivia continued, exuberant and oblivious. "My God, I feel like it's been months. What about this place? It's fucking gorgeous, right? Where's? Fuck. I try to remember it all, but some of the details still evade me. Come in. Oh my goddess. Livy. Yes. Gorgeous. Wait until you see the view from the balcony off the loft. Chills. But first, wine." Just like that, Martin exploded into his usual extroverted self. Olivia had pushed past him, and boom. A joke? I wondered as I hefted a duffel onto my shoulder and held the tiny handle of my wife's rolling suitcase. Maybe Martin had run into the same vegetable seller on the way up. He did have a sometimes overly dry sense of humor. I justified the shift in my mind. The commonalities of the afternoon were coincidence. A feeling needling in the back of my mind told me something was wrong, but I ignored it. I was being paranoid. As I stepped through the door, I was struck by the beauty of the space. There was an ethereal, almost heavenly quality to it. Large picture windows ran up the far side of a great room, split by a loft where a number of plush leather club chairs sat partly hidden by a carved wooden railing. The main seating area was sunken into the floor, an inviting nest of stylish Scandinavian mid-century furniture and a cast-iron stand-alone fireplace. Otis Redding's voice drifted through the air in a cut of The Dock of the Bay I'd never heard. "No TV? Huh?" I remarked, putting down the bags. "And you'll have to thank the host for that. And for the wine," Martin said, pouring another 2 glasses of red to join his own. "Don't worry, Will. There's a record player. Take off your shoes and dust off some of those moves I saw at your wedding." He must have seen me frown or something, because he continued with, "Oh, come on, man. If you're so hard up for a screen to sit in front of." I remember the website saying there was a TV in the basement. My wife's and Martin's idea of relaxation was slightly different from my own. They dance and sing and get drunk, but I needed a ball game from time to time. It could wait a while, though, I thought. For now, I'd enjoy the serenity of our little woodland paradise. I don't remember much of the rest of the day. We drank wine, I'm sure, and I seem to remember helping Olivia make a grilled cheese sandwich with a cast iron skillet and press. All in all, the day and night was uneventful, until around 2 a.m. Olivia shook me awake from a sound sleep. "Will, we forgot Algie in the car. He's been out there for hours." "Baby, he's probably so scared. Can you go get him out?" She was frantic, panicking. "Liv, we took Algernon to a doggy daycare before we left." I croaked groggily. "He's fine, honey. You were the one who walked him in." It took a while for the hyperventilation to calm down, but as soon as it did, she was out like a light. I wasn't so lucky. I lay awake for some time picturing the face of the vegetable seller. She had seemed so frightened, like a parent watching their child follow a ball into a busy street. I closed my eyes and tried to think of anything else, tried to imagine the next few days. I might have actually started to drift off when I heard the scratching. Being a dog owner, it's not unusual to hear scratching on a door at night, but Algernon was nearly 100 miles away. It was the door to the hall. A distinct, slow scratching. I sat up to get a better listen and thought I saw the doorknob turn ever so slowly. I whispered loudly toward the door, "Martin, we're fine." Olivia was just, the handle bolt clicked, and the door creaked open about a foot. "Martin, we're fine." I waited for a while, watching the door, but it remained still. After a while, I went back to uneasy sleep. In the morning, I asked Martin and Olivia about the night before. Olivia couldn't remember her late-night panic, and Martin said he had slept like a log the whole night. I had heard the scratching, seen the door. I had comforted Olivia. At least I thought I had. Maybe this place is haunted, Martin said, smirking as he stirred a mimosa pitcher. Olivia giggled. "I think if I died in a place this nice, I might have to haunt it too." The two of them were so peppy, glowing even. I felt as though I had pulled a double shift on a factory line. The mimosas did help, though the sparkling wine the host had left, just like the Shiraz the day before, had a slight acrid tang, like licking a coin, on the first sip. Evelyn Estate, I noted. A name that seemed familiar enough, but one I would be sure to forget in future grocery trips. "Hey Marty, did you pass a vegetable stand on the way in?" I asked, trying to reason around his odd greeting. "No, we came straight here." "Why? You didn't buy any mountain mushrooms, did you?" He hung on the quip, smiling. "Oh, come on. That was a joke." I felt nauseous all of a sudden. His joke that I had assumed from the day before. Don't what? I ruminated the rest of the morning, and as Olivia cleared the champagne flutes and juice cup from the table, I asked if anyone wanted to go for a hike. "Oh, babe, we were going to go through the vinyl collection and see what gems this place is hiding, but you should go. Work up that feral mountain musk." I forced a smile. If Martin wasn't gay, I might have been concerned about Olivia's rebuke. A part of me actually yearned for a feeling as trivial as jealousy. What I felt was dread, something heavy, growing, but just out of sight. I decided to set out alone, knowing that the crisp autumn air would do me some good. Perhaps it was the unfamiliar setting of the cottage that was unsettling me. How long had it been since I had last slept outside of my own bed? The cottage was perfect in every conceivable way, from the marble-countered kitchen to the spa-like bathroom. But it wasn't home. I hiked a trail that ran just behind the cottage, a hilly, beaten path with plenty of boulders and climbs to challenge my body so my mind could rest. The air did seem restorative, and as I rested on a fallen tree at the peak of a rise, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Now understand, at work, I am practically attached to my phone. An occupational codependency that follows me everywhere I go. It was in that moment looking out over a shallow valley that I realized I hadn't once thought of the thing since arriving. Maybe this place is special in some inscrutable way, I thought. My mind might have searched for some whispering insidiousness because it's detoxing from stress. I pulled out my phone, promising myself that it would just be a glance. 8 missed calls, 23 missed texts. The screen went black. Dead battery. My mind grasped at the void. What had happened? It's Saturday. Algernon? Was he okay? If not, why 23 text messages? No, something else. I thought of grim possibilities as I hurried home, nearly rolling my ankle a half-dozen times. I must have gotten service momentarily while I was resting. How long was whoever trying to contact me? I walked and walked and walked. For too long. The trail was a straight shot. Somewhat challenging, yes, but there were no intersections, no branches. I guess that my hike out was around an hour, perhaps 2 miles at my leisurely pace. I had been walking back for much longer. Where was the cottage? I kept walking and then backtracked, breaking twigs and noting them as I saw them again. I scrutinized the trail, stopping every 100 feet to look around. Where was the damned cottage? My stomach twisted as I considered my predicament. I hadn't brought food or light. I wasn't an outdoorsman, not really. I was hungry. I would have to sleep outside, shivering in the cold, stomach rumbling. Would Olivia come looking for me? I saw her face in my mind, wandering aimlessly through the dark, calling for me and feeling more and more hopeless, just as I was. I remember sitting down on the path and crying, actually crying. Why didn't I turn back at the vegetable stand? The sun was sinking lower and lower into the sky, and then I saw the light from the picture windows of the cottage off in the distance. I had crossed by the same stretch a half-dozen times. It wasn't there. Now it was. I stared at the pointed slivers through the blackening silhouette of 1,000 impassive autumn leaves. Like a campfire, I thought, inviting, but hiding a monster just outside its glow. I wanted to leave, to get Olivia, get in the car and leave. I threw open the front door, but as soon as I entered the cottage, my ordeal seemed somehow distant, dampened. Olivia and Martin sat beside the fireplace as it crackled in time with the dock of the bay. The wine looked refreshing, and the glow that permeated the space comforted me like the easy summers of childhood. "Hi, babe. Where did you get off to?" Olivia asked, lazily slurring her words. I remember my search for the cottage clearly now. I have the benefit of perspective, but at the time, I couldn't give my wife a truthful answer. I couldn't remember. It wasn't important. Just popped out for a minute. Liv. She smiled melancholically. Be waiting till the morning sea. Be waiting till the morning sea. Be waiting till the morning sea. I hadn't noticed the record skipping. I was jolted awake by the sound of breaking glass. Disoriented, my head pounding, I looked around the sunken living room. The fire had died in the fireplace, giving the air an oddly stale smell of ash. I was alone in the dark. The middle of the night, I guessed, though my phone was still in my pocket. Still dead. Another glassy eruption. It was close. Above me. The loft. I darted up the stairs, my trail-blistered feet sending angry pulses up my legs. There was a breeze in it. "Marty? What the hell are you?" Martin threw another wine glass at the floor. A single lamp dimly lit the surroundings. He looked gaunt, his skin devoid of its usual color. All over his arms were small, dark rings and circles. I stepped closer. No, not rings, bite marks. He grabbed another glass and turned toward me, his face, this time unmistakably terrified. "Marty, what's going on? What happened to you?" The opening bass line to "The Dock of the Bay" began to play loudly from below, and Martin seemed to flinch. "This song again?" "Liv," I called down. "I'll be sitting till the evening comes. Olivia." She didn't answer. "Marty, buddy, talk to me." He was trembling, shaking. "I saw him. Will?" I remember." "Who?" "Saw who, Marty?" The music was getting louder. "She'll never let us go." We shouldn't have come." "She? Olivia? What the fuck are talking about? What happened to you?" "She's always here with him. Always watching, pulling, always watching." Slowly and slowly. He was doing a sort of shifting, jittery dance, like a child that needed the potty. This song was always playing. Otis Redding was never my FA. He stopped abruptly, his eyes widening in an exaggerated, animalistic terror that pushed into me like a knife. No. She's. I turned my head slowly and felt something unseen brush against my arm. The song was blaring, seeming to nearly vibrate my teeth and my mouth. I turned back to Martin, and he was on the balcony. He looked back toward me. "I can't." With an almost graceful agility, he stepped up onto the railing and leaned forward, disappearing over the edge. "Marty, no," I screamed as I helplessly watched the split second unfold. I heard my scream. The song had stopped. Marty hadn't made a sound as he fell, but there was a wet thud. I ran over to the balcony, afraid to lean over too far. I couldn't see his body through the opaque blackness below, but I knew he was gone. What had made him do it? Who was she? What? My thoughts spread and thinned and dissipated, muddied by fatigue and shock. My head thrummed, but the rhythm in my temples carried my feet back to my wife. Olivia was sound asleep as I entered the bedroom. I locked the door. I was so tired, so weary, and as I lay my head down, I heard the faint sound of a child crying. So tired, like drowning beneath the weight of spent time. So T.I. Tap, tap, tap. I was awake, but lay with my eyes closed for a moment. The light on the other side of my lid seemed bright. Tap, tap, tap. I could hear something faint in the background, comforting, melodic, beautiful. My head hurt. Tap, 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 tap. No, my head pounded, coursing icy waves of nauseating pain that jarred my brain in a rhythmic tapping. I felt something coarse and rough beneath me, not the expensive feeling sheets of the bed. The familiar, enchanting melody sounded distant, hollow. The light was too bright, but I laboriously pulled open my eyes. Tap. Marty. The events of the night before came rushing back. I was on the floor of the sunken living room. How? I heard Olivia humming through the ringing in my ears, a reverberating echo of the tapping. I pulled myself to my feet. Olivia. Morning, babe. You look like you slept well. I'm just making a pitcher of Bloody Mary, extra spicy how you like it. You want one? She was stirring and swaying her hips to whatever song was in her head. Olivia. Martin. He. Last night. Who? She smiled, radiant, beautiful, a divine portrait of my wife in a scarcely buttoned shirt that ended mid-thigh. One of mine. Martin. Marty. He. A sob caught in my throat. He killed himself last night. He jumped off of the balcony. Her face softened into a look of vaguely maternal concern. Oh, babe, that's terrible. Was he one of your baseball players? No, Olivia. Marty. Martin Harris. Our friend. The one who came with us on this trip. Look, if this is a joke. Liv, it's fucked up. He's dead. Liv, he's fucking dead. She carried a glass over to me, her face bearing the slightest touch of confusion. Will, I can see you're upset, but we came on this trip alone. Our romantic getaway, remember? She ran a finger along the inside edge of the button-down shirt to her navel. I don't know any Martin. She took a sip of the drink and licked her bottom lip. It's just us. I know. Olivia, I'm fucking serious, Martin, he. Will, you're confused, stressed. Maybe we could just. She closed on me slowly, sliding the shirt up over a bare hip. I could feel the inviting heat of her body, the curve of her. No. Fuck. I tried to focus. Martin. He was dead. Olivia, something's not right here with this place. Don't you see that? That damn song, the wine. When was the last time any of us ate? Everything was coming together, all of the little details. Martin had said he remembered. What were we forgetting? Olivia flexed her hips against me, shrugging the shirt off of one of her shoulders. Her seduction. The cottage, I thought. It's all a seduction. I pulled away from her and ran up the stairs to the loft. Martin was there. He had to be. I saw him jump. As I crossed the loft, a shard of glass bit into my foot, sending me hobbling toward the balcony. The glass that Martin broke the night before. It had happened. I wasn't crazy. I opened the doors, my head in the vice-like grip of a tightening migraine. I looked. Martin. His body, thin and pallid as the night before, sprawled over a wide granite knob that jutted from the earth. But he was mutilated, shredded, innards scattered, and muscles torn from bone as if by some wild animal. What had happened to him? What? I heard the music begin to play again. Sitting in the morning sun. I hopped away from the balcony. Olivia. He's down there. He's... Suddenly, my thoughts poured out of my head and over my shoulders, washing me in a warm release like coming home from the snow. I heard the shard crunch in my foot as I brought it down. This really is an amazing song. The cottage is magical. I walked toward the stairs, gazing down on the room below. Olivia lay on the sofa propped up on her elbows, bouncing a raised foot behind her to the rhythm of the song. The shirt she had been wearing sat crumpled on the floor. Our romantic getaway, I remembered. Just us. I awoke on the sofa, my head resting on Olivia's chest. My mind was foggy, but light. Olivia slowly stroked my hair, and as I stirred, she said, I was wondering when you'd wake up. Were we talking about something? I wouldn't say we talked much. She grinned. I felt, in that moment, like I was missing a word on the tip of my tongue. Something slightly elusive, but ultimately unimportant. How long have we been here? I asked. She sighed. Not nearly long enough, but you should really go for a hike. You said the whole way here that you didn't want to sit around the whole time like a vegetable. Vegetable? So how about it? Why don't you go work up that feral mountain musk? Feral. I felt a wave of déjà vu come over me. Not a bad idea. I might just pop out for a bit. The words came out of my mouth without my thinking them, but I had some nascent misgivings about the notion of a hike. Had I heard some story about a mountain lion attack? A hiker who had gotten lost? I couldn't remember. Actually, Liv, I think I remember something about there being a TV in the basement. I might check to see if a game's on. I felt her chest rising and falling beneath my head, her breath quickening slightly. Don't. She had whispered the word with a sudden urgency. There was something foreboding and familiar about the it and how she said it, but as I craned my neck to see her face, she looked into my eyes through heavy lids and slurred out, Don't. Forget your drink, babe. The door to the basement wasn't obvious, a short door, perhaps 4 feet tall, in the hallway to the bedrooms. I ducked low before carefully descending a flight of steep, squeaky stairs. My foot hurt like I had accidentally caught a nail or something, but kept heading downward. I heard the sound of static before I noticed the blue-white glow of the television. Did Olivia leave it on? I wondered as I rounded a cobwebby timber wall. The television was small with wood veneer sides and large silver knobs. I sat down in front of it trying to remember why I had come down in the first place. The dark little space had no discernible lighting other than the undulating speckles of the screen, but still it felt right. Ah, the photos, I thought, eyeing a tattered shoebox, white edges of Polaroids peeking over the top. I was getting them for 4. I tried to conjure the name for the face in my mind, that smiling, beautiful, familiar face. What was her name? Honey, I would fuck that house. Oh, she was funny. Just us. And sultry. The photos focused me back. Faded pictures of a happy family. A little girl on a rope swing pushed by her father, I supposed. A boy and his mother beaming in dappled light. A teenage girl painting the siding of a dollhouse. The little girl again, riding a bike with streamers on the handlebars, her mother cautiously hovering behind. The hairstyles and clothing suggested late 60s or early 70s. They seemed happy, contented. Tap, tap, tap. That sound again. I put a few of the photos in my pocket for. Tap, tap. What was her name again, and why did my foot hurt? Tap, 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 tap. The sound of the static was so loud, it reminded me of, there was a man. Oh, what had happened to him? And there was a tap. Marty. Olivia. It came rushing back, and a voice rasped right behind me. You don't belong here. Get out. My head was suddenly stricken with a blinding pain, like someone had struck it with an axe. I looked around frantically, my vision blurry. You don't belong. I felt a sudden chill overtake me and then heard quick footsteps in the distance. The stairs. Will. Olivia screamed from above. Olivia. I shouted back, my voice hoarse, my throat dry. I trudged toward the stairs, limping past my agonizing foot. I felt so weak, feeble, resting at each of the stairs in order to keep going. Olivia screamed again, a piercing, guttural scream. I pulled myself through the small door and onto the dusty floor of the cottage. I could see footprints in the grime, bloody, smeared footprints, small footprints, large ones, and a distinct set heading away from the basement door, slimy, long, and black. With great effort, I pulled myself to my feet, rubbing something sticky from my eyes. Blood. Olivia's continued. Gut-wrenching cries pushed me forward, down the hall and into the... I stopped dead for a moment, shaking in buffeting waves of horror at what I saw. The thing looked up at me, through black eyeless sockets. It was humanoid, with glistening skin in mottled gray and white, washed out further by its bloody, lipless mouth. Get out. It shrieked. Olivia was beneath it. She didn't even look like my wife, thin and pale, missing shredded chunks of her thighs and shoulder. The thing jerked toward her belly and pulled its head back, stretching mangled flesh and bloody pink viscera before gnashing and gulping it down. It was eating her. Olivia pushed and scratched and screamed, and I finally pushed past the terrified shock. Get away from her. I croaked, running forward and ramming into the thing. It tumbled over, and I grabbed Olivia, helping her onto her feet. She could barely walk, heaving and retching as she stumbled. I could barely carry her weight, weak and wincing with every step. The door. Just make it to the door. Foot after foot, we were getting closer. A few more steps. 2. 1. I passed the threshold. I felt the evening air of the porch. We were free. Safe. Olivia screamed, her body lurching backward. The thing held her wrist, pulling Olivia's chewed, bloody arm. No. Olivia shrieked. The thing's fingers tearing flesh and exposing bone below. I pulled Olivia, leaning my weight forward and bracing against the door frame. I pulled and pulled and pulled, and the two of us tumbled forward and onto the porch. Olivia continued to scream in heaving cries, and as I looked at her, I saw why. Her left arm ended at a tattered stump right at the elbow. I didn't look back as I dragged us across the porch and toward our SUV, but I heard the ripping of meat and the grating of teeth on bone behind me. I don't remember our drive or leaving the cottage. I awoke in a hospital. The doctor said that when we were found, we were dehydrated and extremely malnourished. When Olivia and I didn't come to work on Tuesday, our employers had called our phones. It had actually been Algernon's doggy day care that eventually called the police, or rather animal control, on Thursday. We were reported missing when no one could account for our whereabouts. That was 6 days before we were eventually found. Olivia retched and shook constantly that first day in the hospital. They pumped her stomach and found only coagulated blood. The doctor seemed confused when I mentioned the missing arm and the disembowelment. "We get this sort of thing more than you'd think," he explained. Hikers go off into the woods without adequate preparation. They get lost, disoriented. Some of them lose touch with reality. Just be glad you're alive. Olivia still has digestive problems, aches. She walks with a limp and can't use her left arm. I still have daily migraines. Psychosomatic, they tell us, one psychologist after another. The drugs help to dull the pain, but whenever I look at my wife, I see an open belly and a bloody stump. She averts her gaze when I pass by, but days after leaving the hospital, I worked up the nerve to look in the mirror. Nails, around a dozen of them, tapped deeply into my head. We remembered Marty a couple weeks after we were found. I got in touch with his sister. She says she doesn't know who I am, that she's always been an only child. Company emails, nothing. Wedding photos, nothing. They never found his blue Jetta, and I doubt they ever will. That thing ate Martin, and not just his body, his existence. To my surprise, the Polaroids I took from the basement were still in my pocket when we were found. They don't prove our story, but they seemed like proof of something, so I posted them on an online forum centered around Blue Ridge Mountain history. Weeks passed, and I had forgotten about it. Then one day, I got a message from McCormick 413. "I recognize the family in your pictures. Sad story. Horrible story. I came up with the boy, Bobby Stratford. Good kid as I recall, though it's been some years now. Daddy of the family was Big Earl Stratford. He gone off on an overnight in the woods with their little girl, Penny. Neither came back, hide or hair, just up and vanished. It was a big story at the time for those around, but in truth there weren't much folks around. Small pond kind of thing. Anyway, some time passed and people forgot about Big Earl and Little Pen. Mama of the family's name was Helen, and after her man went to ground, nobody saw much of her or Bobby or their eldest, Alice, anymore. Then one day in winter, maybe 73, a ranger found Alice wandering the woods alone. Died of exposure the day she got into the hospital. They didn't find Bobby and Helen in their cottage, but they did find blood, and a few years later, a mess of bones buried out back. Thing is, I heard that when they done the autopsy on Alice, her stomach was full of meat. Human meat. Some folks said she ate her whole family, others that it was just Bobby and Helen. A couple locals say she caught her death in the cold looking for another meal. Like I said, sad and horrible. Be well, brother. Alice Stratford. The name taps in my mind. The girl with the dollhouse. The thing that drove my friend to suicide and fed on my wife for days. I didn't tell Olivia about the email. She's been through enough. After remembering Marty, she began to remember someone else. Chris Harris. The name rang a bell. He was Marty's husband. He loved Otis Redding. Marty called him his Frisco Bay. After the song, that song, I started to remember Chris too. Stirring drinks, dancing in the sunken living room. Olivia and I don't talk about it much. She's been through enough. I don't want to burden her with all of the memories that have been slowly seeping back into my head. And I don't have the heart to tell her that just recently I've begun to remember another guest of the cottage, Evelyn, our daughter. Fifth story. Have you tasted human flesh? I was 14 years old when I first met the Wendigo. The Algonquin-based Native American tribes believed Wendigos were, indeed, people. It is commonly known that the Wendigo is a human that has consumed human flesh. However, it is not commonly known that the act of cannibalism was considered to make a person vulnerable to an evil spirit, allowing them to be possessed and become a Wendigo. A mental illness is even named after it. Wendigo psychosis is the need to consume human flesh as food. While some consider it to be made up, there is evidence to suggest its existence. A man called Swift Runner in the 1800s killed and devoured his family, despite the fact that he was 25 miles from food. More recently, in 1981, Issei Sagawa killed and consumed a woman, driven by desire, curiosity, maybe something more? The Wendigo legend is considered nothing more than a spook story. After all, the Wendigo is now only a scary monster, as detached from us as vampires or werewolves. After all, there is no one that is truly starving in the beautiful, gluttonous United States. Why would we fear consuming each other? We whet our appetites on gleaming, luscious meals day after day. In the dead of winter, surrounded by ice and snow, and the howling of the wolves, we have our heating systems to keep us warm. But the Wendigo came to me that day, but not how I would expect. No, he did not lumber out of the woods, 20 feet tall and ghastly thin, supporting heavy antlers and a mouthful of ravenous teeth. He appeared to me, in the mirror, as myself. Because, at the heart of it, all monsters come from people, one way or the other. I stood in front of the mirror. I was plump with full cheeks then, almost pretty. He spoke to me with my own mouth, with my own voice. But my eyes were not my own. There was darkness. Gears of shadow clicked and rolled behind my irises. Have you ever tasted something worth the price? I was startled, of course. Who wouldn't be? I did not know what he was. Only research and agonizing would bring me to his name. What? I asked. I feared insanity, maybe. What I had just said seemed to come from outside of me. Have you ever chased down your prey? He told me. Sunk your teeth into the body? Consumed their flesh, every molecule? I was scared, of course. But what the Wendigo offered was almost intriguing. Perhaps they only come to those they know will be receptive to their call. No, I haven't, I told the mirror, and watched the spirit go back behind my eyes. You grow fat on food not worth the boxes that contains it. But flesh, when you eat it alive, it is not only flesh. It is power, sweet and thick, the best meal you will ever eat. He left me, then. I cried. Yes, you may mock me, but I cried. I was a weak little girl, then. But the Wendigo was not wrong. What he offered me, what he offered my soft little body, was power, and power was a banquet compared to everything I had ever eaten. After months of thought, I decided to accept him. There were growing pains. I will not dispute that. I laid in bed. The Wendigo raged inside of me, growling, roaring, screaming. Pain racked my body for days on end, like a storm of ice raging inside of me. He was forgiving but not kind. He consumed my own flesh in place of what I did not eat. Chunks of it came off, leaving only clean bone behind. 2 weeks later, I awoke hungry. It was dark. I checked the clock. It was around 3:30 a.m. It was much too early for my parents to be awake, so I snuck out of bed. Once, I might have feared shadows. Scary men in hockey masks peering around corners. But the Wendigo inside me assured that I would be the biggest threat in any room. There are benefits as well as costs to becoming a monster. I went into the kitchen, and I consumed. I ate everything I could reach. My teeth, which seemed sharper than usual, tore into packages and bags. I ate chips and cookies and candy. Wrappers and packages fell to the floor. I ate half a container of ice cream. I ate handfuls of potato salad. I tore open a container of raw beef for burgers and gorged myself on it. After I was done, I carefully cleaned up the mess and went back to my room. My stomach stuck out. Grotesque. Unnatural. I looked several months pregnant. I stared at myself in the darkness. My eyes were colorless in the low light. My hair hung like curtains around my face. Was it an illusion, or was I taller? Was it an illusion, or were my cheekbones sharper, teeth larger? Why would you eat that garbage? The Wendigo howled at me in my own voice. I was hungry, I responded. Power, the Wendigo snarled. Power. Power is what you want. I was hungry, I told him. I was wrong, of course. Only power would truly satisfy me, us. Only one meal would be worth it. I looked towards my door. I saw myself in profile in the mirror. My eyes were bulging out of my head. My mouth was hanging slightly open, teeth still coated a bit with the blood from the raw beef. Outside of that door, my parents slept, unaware. They will be worth it, the Wendigo told me. I was hungry, I repeated. I loved my parents. I went to sleep. Over the next few weeks, the Wendigo ate up my body. This was my punishment. He ate me like candy, giant chunks of me just falling off my body. He roared in my organs. He froze me from the inside out, a monster from the depths of the purest night, the deepest cold. It was almost beautiful. I looked in the mirror a few times. I couldn't recognize myself. The monster inside was making me different. I was taller. I was thinner, yes. My ribs stood out. The knobs of my spine were visible. My wrist bone was behind only a small layer of skin. I could bite through it and my teeth would reach the bone. I would not devour my parents. I would not consume power, not yet. The Wendigo was inside of me, but he needed me to eat the flesh to truly take over. I wondered how the power would taste. I wonder, nah sleep, if you know where I am writing you from. My parents were very upset. They did not understand me and the Wendigo. They did not understand what I was becoming, what I would become. They told me anorexia was consuming me. Anorexia. So insulting. They were wrong. It was all him, and he was incredible. When they took me away, I bit the hand of a man wearing white clothes. His blood tasted electrifying on my teeth. I had not eaten garbage food for weeks. I had not eaten for weeks. The blood awoke my hunger. I write you this letter from the institution they sent me to. Someday, they will let me out.